Hello and welcome to another BetaKit Live. I am Douglas Saltis, editor-in-chief of BetaKit, and I just moved into a new place, so my office is a little new. Apologies. But it's kind of a great example of the types of things that Canadian businesses are dealing with right now. It's kind of a lot, from an accelerated digital transformation to an employee shift to, well, remote and hybrid work. The recent Cisco designed State of Startups survey, presented in partnership with BetaKit, reveals those stated challenges, priorities, areas of investment for Canadian startups and small businesses. I suggest you read it in depth because there's a lot of interesting numbers that we're going to be talking about today. But despite those challenges, it's pretty clear that business leaders have moved beyond survival and resilience. They're kind of energized again for scale, growth, success. That said, the question remains, how do we manage all these new realities of scaling business in the midst of the greatest digital transformation ever experienced? I have no answers to that question. Thankfully, I have three incredibly smart panelists who will be providing the answers for me. So I'm going to introduce them right now. First up, we have Lisa Ricci. She's the head of sales, small business solutions at Cisco Canada. Then we got Andrew Popliger, CPA, CA, partner for the national technology sector at PwC Canada. And then Shawns Ricci, who is the general manager of talent intelligence at Ceridian Dayforce. And if you're noticing a combined last name thing here that was planned, there is a familial relationship between Lisa and Sean. So disclosures. They might also be broadcasting in different rooms of their home right now. Okay. So we're going to get into the state of Canadian startups and small businesses right now. But this isn't a one-way conversation. On whatever social media feed you are viewing this, or if you're watching the VOD on those channels or reading an article and seeing the embedded video on BetaKit, you can still participate. So I highly encourage you to submit a question on any channel, leave a comment on an article. We will capture that. We will try to get those questions answered live on the stream right now. And if not, we'll make sure that they get answered for our wrap up, which will be published on betakit.com. So if you have a question about what's going on right now, this crazy 2021, which followed a crazy 2020, please post them. They'll be sent to me. We'll make sure that our panelists get them answered today. But I think to start things off, let's walk through, let's unpack these signs of energy and activity in Canadian tech that I think we're all seeing, feeling, experiencing. And then maybe, Andrew, I'll start with you just because you've got the most wide angle lens on the ecosystem, I think, just because of your role. You're often a person that we're going to for commentary based upon what we're reporting. And we actually even spoke to you in our write-up on the State of Startups survey. I know just off the dome, just last week, we published two reports just tracking the explosion of venture investment in Canada, city by city. We've got Toronto now seeing 1.6 billion invested in startups just in the GTA last quarter. And then Vancouver, which is almost caught up to Toronto, which has been traditionally the largest ecosystem in Canada, rocking about a billion in venture investment for startups in the greater Vancouver area and in BC in general. Those are more than numbers, though. Those are signs of activity. Those are signs of transition and change. And I'm wondering maybe if you could help us understand what stands out the most to you when you're looking at that and you're trying to get a finger on the pulse of what's going on in this ecosystem.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, if you'd asked me about 2 years ago at the start of the pandemic, Andrew, what do you think is going to happen over the next 18 months, 2 years? I would have never predicted the last year and a half or so. I think Canadian tech has experienced incredible growth. It's the pandemic kind of accelerated the pace of change that we were on from a digital transformation perspective, and Canadian tech really benefited from that. I think when you look at the funding numbers, the funding is much larger, this year than compared to the prior year and to the year before that. But really, when you're going down to the data, the number of deals, the amount of deals is quite, similar to what it was 2 years ago. But the funding tickets are much larger. So what you're seeing is, the Canadian tech ecosystem was thriving. We had a lot of, seed investments in startups. You go back 5 years ago, And a lot of those, younger companies have scaled up and are becoming more mature, and the funding sizes are larger. So they're being, we're seeing something, in the last 5 years that we didn't see before in Canadian tech is Canadian tech companies are being successful in scaling up and getting that funding. So that's why you're seeing a lot more, larger funding numbers because the rounds are, a lot more substantive for those companies. I think what will be interesting to see is there's still lots of seed investment. So we still have a very thriving startup ecosystem in Canada. So I'm excited actually to see in the next, 3 to 5 years, the current startups that are raising seed financings, to see what they're going to raise or what's going to happen to them in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, there's just so much more fuel on the fire, as you noted. And I think, with that, that's not just coming from, those early stage seed rounds that you're talking about, but we're seeing kind of larger enterprises like participate as well over the last year. And I think that's probably the easiest way to get Sean involved, just because of how you joined the Ceridian team, which was having your startup Ideal be acquired earlier in the year. And I know that when we talked kind of prior to this conversation in preparation of like what we really want to focus on, you had noted kind of something that I think would be familiar to most founders in the ecosystem, where in the early days of the pandemic, there was that kind of pause, that waiting to see how things would sort out. And then for the type of work that you do, just a rapid acceleration that led to an acquisition. So can you maybe touch upon maybe how that wait and see turned into go, go, go?
Yeah, absolutely. At the beginning of the pandemic, think back to, I have a vivid memory of the day that, the pandemic really hit me personally. And it was a Friday the 13th, believe it or not. That was the day I think that Tom Hanks got COVID and Trump shut down flights from Europe or right around there anyways that week. And we were headed into March break for sure. And, at that point, it really felt like the things were crashing hard, right? I mean, COVID was coming left, right, and center. And at Ideal, we have retail customers, we have hospitality customers, and in the early days of the pandemic, and even continuing now, those were the areas that were the hardest hit. And so, for a business like Ideal, who provides software to those types of organizations, we immediately had to take a bit of a defensive posture, and we did that. And I think a lot of my peers that were running, startups, small businesses of the same size, did the same thing. We didn't want to take a wait and see approach, because wait and see could have killed the business. So, we definitely prepared for the worst, but hoped for the best. That's what, you're always supposed to be doing. And so we immediately kind of went into a defensive posture, went into some cost cutting measures. But we certainly did that to make sure that the business could thrive. And sure enough, we make productivity software, and I think a lot of technology companies do. Now, ours happens to be in the world of human capital and talent intelligence. And we make software that allows organizations to do more, with less, specifically. And so, although we took a defensive posture in terms of making sure the business could survive, it turns out solutions like ours actually thrived in the pandemic. And when organizations still had to run their business and keep the lights on, it was an opportunity for them to procure, software tools like Ideal provides, and quite frankly, like Ceridian provides, to make sure that as they exit the pandemic and they still need to keep the lights on in their businesses, they can do that. So we really went from, fearing the worst to having a fantastic year at Ideal. And I think it was just focus and, providing productivity tools that organizations need even in the worst of times.
Yeah, well, let's flip that. First, let's just all pause to remember the idea of March break, or even breaks at all. I don't think many of us have experienced those in the last 18 months, but just that idea of lingering on that thought of opportunity, because I think the opportunity that you're articulating, and I guess you personally experienced at your company, wasn't one of an opportunity to continue surviving, but an opportunity to actually scale and grow. Which actually reminds me of a stat that we saw coming from the survey report, where right now, for Canadian small businesses, Canadian startups, market growth and expansion is the number one priority for businesses in the next year. So that is over 45% of our salary. That is not a circumstance of maintaining customers, meeting payroll. We're talking about expansion. And maybe, Lissa, probably this is the best place to get you into this space because, again, you're working for an organization that has a lot of similar tools for these businesses as they scale and grow, particularly as they deal in digital environments. I think we'll get into some of the talent collaboration stuff, but I just want to just stop and pause on, I think the first thing that you said to me when we caught up a few months ago, where you're just like, Lissa is just too busy. There's too much going on. So I'm wondering if you could just put a perspective, maybe similar to Andrew's, of how you're seeing the ecosystem from the startup small business side in terms of what they're kind of chewing on to fuel the growth priorities.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing from our perspective is completely in line with what Andrew already spoke of, and then what I got to see firsthand. My husband experienced right throughout the pandemic, and small businesses, continue to invest, to grow, and expand. So I'm super proud, at Cisco Design, because what we were forced to do was really sit down and think about what are the areas of technology that a small business needs today and then for the future, and make sure that it is at a price point that can meet their requirements and that makes sense for the business, and lead with heart, right? We had to lead with heart from day one throughout this, and that has not changed for us. So we are super busy, educating any business, on what we can do to help them digitalize, how we can help them accelerate, and how we can help them, with a trial that will ensure that they can be successful today and then for their future plans of their business. So it has been probably the funnest time of my career right now, to be able to go to market and have these types of conversations and really learn, from these small businesses that, inspire me and are so innovative. And it's been a really interesting opportunity.
When did you feel the transition from, and what I really should be asking you is, like, Shawn just gave a very calm description of the last year experience. I should be asking you if behind the scenes, if it was that way, but let's go, in terms of your professional role, when did that kind of lead, like that we need help coming from your customer base, turn to, this isn't something that we need to like keep the lights on, to, no, we're looking to scale, we're looking to grow? Are the conversations, the tenor of those conversations going more away from support towards, expansion and opportunity? Is that something that is it in the ask? Is it in the budgets? Is it maybe just even in the attitudes of some of the customers that you're speaking with?
I was going to go straight to attitude, Doug. I think that we had to call out right away, as fast as possible, that small business is not risky business, right? And that's kind of been our motto as a team and a game plan. And it's, again, we've seen such success, which we're so proud. We want small businesses to succeed, right? We're here to help them to grow. I'll just throw a couple quick stats here. So, on average, a company allocates 3.5 to 6% of its revenue towards IT. So if you're not looking at your business that way right now, this could be an opportunity for you to go ahead and do so, because IT is going to be a foundation where it supports your employee experience so that you can retain your employees that are going to demand and drive the execution of the strategy that you're trying to, for the business outcomes you're trying to achieve. So, you really got to take a look on what is your investment in IT? How do you look at your technology plan, and partner with a technology provider that can set you up for success, so that it's not just, an ad hoc, kind of winging it scenario. It's crucial to the success of growth and expansion, is what we now know for sure. We have the proven results, that we know that for sure.
Yeah, we've got to be past the point of winging it right now, because in the last 18, 19 months, we've seen wing it either didn't work or it did work, and we're now in a new phase. But, hey, we're talking about like all the good things that we're seeing in the ecosystem. We're seeing, explosions of funding. We're seeing founder exits, demand for new investments. That means that there are no problems, right? Everything's fine. Things are happy-go-lucky. Except I think when we all talked in preparation for this, and I would think that probably every single person that the four of us have spoken to in the last 3 months about their number one concern is probably related to talent, right? And I really want to dig into this because we could have maybe made this whole conversation about talent. The survey that we put together, the State of Startups report, indicated that this was a top priority. The shortage of digital skills and talent was listed as the number one barrier to digital transformation. Over 50% of respondents. If you know anything about putting together surveys, like over 50% is a lot. I just want to maybe just throw this up here, and maybe let's go back to Shawn, because I know from the operator's perspective here, I think one of the things that you were saying, two interesting things that you shared with us before, is that even when there was that pullback and there was a little bit of that idea of doing a bit, it didn't seem to impact the hiring considerations at Ideal or Ceridian. And I think you also said like the number one thing that you've been thinking about is or struggling with or just like eating up all your mental headspace has been hiring and talent. So do you just want to walk us through that from your perspective?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So I guess a couple things on that. I think it's about hiring as well. But often when we talk about talent, we tend to think of recruiting. We hear the word talent and we think of recruiting. And, I definitely, want to take a moment to recognize that talent equally means new team members that we're bringing in, but also our existing employees. And throughout the pandemic, I think that when it was hard to recruit because you didn't know what the next quarter would look like or the next half would look like, investing in your existing team certainly made sense, and that's certainly something we tried to do at Ideal. It's don't ignore things like burnout, for instance, right? I mean, that's getting a little bit better now, and I know that's been a thing that's been talked about. But as we went remote, as one example, something that we took a hard look at was, okay, everyone's got kids and they're working at different times of day, and acknowledging that we are working asynchronously. And that was at a small company, let alone a big company with offices in different time zones as well. And so, how can we improve that? So, we would look at, things like Slack, for instance, if we're all using Slack, making sure that people use their do not disturb and just having those conversations about getting a message at 11 o'clock at night and what's the expectation about replying to that. And I think those little things have always been, unwritten rules about how we interact with each other that way. But making sure that you just talk about it with your team and be vocal about it, and don't just assume it's going to work out. What often seems like a small inconvenience can lead to burnout really, really quickly, and everyone's got a different situation. And so that's first and foremost. I think whenever we talk about talent, we need to look internally at our existing team. On to the other part of talent, which is recruiting. We often salespeople often have an acronym ABC, always be closing. I think as a small business leader that's in growth mode, there should be another acronym if you're a leader in the business, which is ABR, always be recruiting. And that means building relationships with individuals that you may not be able to bring on board for a year, but could be a fit one day, but now the timing isn't quite right. And especially in small business, I find that leaders of small businesses tend to want to outsource, recruiting. I'll hire, a talent acquisition person or a recruiter, and all of a sudden, magically, I'll grow my team by 10 people. Recruiting for leaders of small business, I think it's got to be a priority. I mean, if you don't have calendar holds just to focus on recruiting as a leader, I would probably say you want to think about that as an example. And especially in small businesses, it really feels like a team sport. And you want everyone to try and recruit. It's not just about outsourcing it to your internal HR or a recruiting firm. Everyone has to focus on it. So as we come out of the pandemic, I think a lot of small businesses have a growth opportunity, and I think talent, both internal and hiring new team members, needs to be a huge priority, and we certainly have always thought about it that way across a couple businesses now.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're identifying again the growth opportunity, but I think on this talent point, it's also kind of a defensive hedge too. I love the idea that you're throwing at the fact that you should start working on acquiring what your business needs before it needs it, so that it's there when you're ready. But there's also another component to this, and we'll get Andrew in first, and then we'll go to Alyssa here, just in terms of what's driving the need for that full court press on recruitment, on talent hiring. Some of that is, again, the the money is being raised in service of something, right? We're seeing that in the ecosystem. But we also have to talk, about the hybrid work environment, the remote work environment, how the barriers between the Canada and US border that have led to so much increase in venture investment have also led to US companies to look at Canadian talent as an opportunity. So you have Canadian businesses not necessarily competing against each other, but competing on all sides. I'm wondering, Andrew, just like, Shawns giving us an amazing like operator perspective, but PwC, you work with companies and you're kind of inside with them, speaking to them about their needs, and then you're also kind of wide angle viewing it. What did I lay out all the contributing factors here? Like, I didn't even use the term great resignation yet, but like, what sticks to you at the top in terms of not only the talent need, but the talent crunch and competition?
Yeah, well, I think the pandemic changed the way we work. We need a lot more workers with digital skills now, so that, like I said before, the pace of change is accelerated, and the pandemic accelerated that pace of change, even faster than it was before. But from an exciting standpoint, we're on the edge of a new world of work here. Reimagining how we work with technology, innovating, delivering different. So small businesses across Canada are looking, how do we to deliver differently to our clients. So I think there's lots of opportunity there, but there's a big challenge. There's a shortage of talented workforce, and you said before that there's international competition now, that U.S. companies can attract Canadian talent, but I think it's also the opposite, where I have a lot of clients across the country, Canadian tech clients, and they're attracting talent from across the world. So I think the border definitely goes both ways. But it is a new world out there. There are new skills that are needed, and I think kind of to Sean's point is, well, if you're investing in your employees, you're going to be able to challenge this new world or be successful in this new world. But talent and people, I think, are companies' most important assets. No matter what product you have, no matter how big you are, without people, you're not going to be successful. So I think, if there's one message I'd like to come across today, is that, companies need to think about people and investing in that talent to be successful in the future.
Okay, yeah, you're completely right. And I want everyone kind of watching right now to hold that thought and put a pin in it, because our whole third segment is going to be maybe unpacking some of the inconsistencies we're seeing about the importance of that and then how it's being enacted. But Andrew, you also just talked about like kind of making that a priority to challenge and to go into market. But it also is a challenge for businesses. And I will say, this BetaKit Live is about the state of Canadian startups and small businesses. We're coming at this from the company perspective. But Lissa, one of the things that really struck out to me is you were seeing it from the other perspective, that this is kind of a candidate market right now. That it's actually because of all this opportunity happening at the corporate level, at the ecosystem level, for individual employees, they're kind of setting the terms of this. And I wonder if you can just share your experience of that, how you're seeing it kind of on the ground, talking day to day with small businesses.
Yeah, I mean, again, to take it to the technology of the Cisco design, I mean, how relatable is it? Like, we're talking to our customers and I'm experiencing the same thing. I'm also a leader of a team that has to work remote with my kids downstairs doing virtual school and my husband at the other end of the dining room table, figuring out how I'm going to keep my business running, hit my number, all of those things. It's the same. We had the same dilemmas, right? So to have that conversation with other small business leaders and with our partner community, and to kind of, go through the motions together and say, we learned this and pivot, or we tried that and it worked, let's go. Again, really, it was really fun opportunity, right? So we were kind of just all in it together, having these conversations. And it was wonderful, again, to nurture those stories, right? And promote those stories. So when a small business had something awesome that really worked out in terms of how they chose to collaborate with their team, or how they chose to manage their team during this like super quick pivot to remote hybrid, we helped to really advocate that, and to get those stories out there, because again, we're here to help small businesses, right? We wanted everyone to survive, so we were here to help market and amplify any good news that would essentially be helpful to the small business community and to startups. So again, collaboration tools and getting to use those firsthand and play around with them and get to know them differently, because we are all in it at the same time, was really helpful to the conversation.
Okay, let's collaboration tools. That's a keyword right there, and I think that can allow us to set up the next part of the conversation, really tying together some of the things that Andrew and Sean said as well, and point to maybe some places where small businesses need a bit more help, maybe some places that they're struggling with. Again, I'm not a mathematician. I am just a liberal arts major who runs a publication. So I can't dig into the numbers too much, but that's why you guys are here. But I want to give two kind of stats that we got from the survey, which seem contradictory, but I think we can dig into them and find some source of both maybe movement about what's happening in the ecosystem. The first one being that despite what really Andrew and Sean and everyone on this panel is saying about the importance of talent and talent driving how our new hybrid remote workplace, for some reason in the survey, talent sourcing and employee experience was one of the lowest priorities for business in the next year, with only less than 10% of respondents. That's really interesting. It seems to jive completely differently with the digital transformation barriers in terms of talent being kind of that barrier. But then combined with that, and I think maybe this is where we get into the meat of it, we had another stat showing that collaboration solutions were the top technology investment over. Again, this was over 50% of respondents. So there is an understanding here that they need to get the software, they need to get the tooling to allow employees to work in this new environment. But to Sean's point before about those little components there, they might seem like small things. I guess in this work environment can blow up to be much bigger issues. Are we seeing a disconnect between, or maybe the transition, let's say, between businesses understanding that they need this software and now figuring out how to run their business fully remote? And I want to maybe go back to you, Sean, on this point, because I think this is something that you were pointing to earlier about recognizing that, just because you've bought the software, that doesn't mean that running the business got any easier remotely.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that often, we look at collaboration tools and we think, okay, all I have to do is buy it. And once I kind of buy it, and I'll give everyone that WebEx license or that Slack license or whatever collaboration tool that you're using, and they'll just figure it out. And I think, we really have to take a step back from a change management standpoint as well. And whenever you put a tool in place, even when it's a simple tool to use, like many of the Cisco products are, at the end of the day, you still have people that don't, understand how to use them. And so you need to be thoughtful about how you roll that out, how you deal with change management. And every tool does take some sort of process to make sure that it's successful within your organization. And I think sometimes, some of these collaboration tools, they are so simple to use that it's easy to underestimate the impact it can have on your workforce. But I guarantee you, there's somebody on your team that doesn't know how to use video conferencing or hasn't used it, depending, of course, on your organization, right? And often I think, especially in small businesses where you've got a small business leader who may be quite savvy and just make some assumptions about, everyone on their team and how quickly they'll adopt something. And not only is it about, being able to functionally use some of these tools that we're investing in, you're also getting into some more challenges around the etiquette of using these tools. And, today we're all talking remotely, we're all on webcams, but we've probably all been in those meetings where somebody doesn't have their webcam on, as a classic example. And so are they always supposed to have their webcam on? Should they have them on only in customer calls? If it's an internal meeting, are they allowed to eat lunch? And these are all the little things that we don't think about when we roll out collaboration software. And so purchasing the tool is step one, but I think it's working with your technology partners like Cisco to really figure out, how do we successfully roll this out to our users and make sure that it's a collaboration tool that's beneficial to them and not just something that makes it a bit easier.
Yeah, it's one thing to say that IT's got this. It's another thing to say IT is responsible for the total operations of our business. And I love that idea of software at scale working a little too well and there being unintended consequences of some of that work. Andrew, let's throw to you, because I know when we were interviewing you for the write-up that we did about the survey, you were really hammering on this need to invest in talent. And I just think from knowing you that talent investment is a little bit more holistic than just the software. So can you just unpack what that investment means for you, and let us know if you feel what Shawn is saying resonates with you?
Yeah, no, I think what Shawn is saying does resonate. And I think when I saw the results of the Cisco survey at first, I was a bit perplexed, because it surprised me that talent kind of was at the bottom of the priorities or the next year. So I started asking questions. How was the survey asked? How was that question asked? Is this the true picture of reality out there? And depending on the timing of the survey too, I think talent crunch that we're seeing has been, it's a bigger talent crunch now, in the month of September and October than it was definitely a couple months ago. But then I started looking at the results and analyzing them and saying, well, if I'm an entrepreneur, when I'm building my business, I'm always externally focused. So I'm thinking, okay, I got to build my product, I got to scale my company, I got to invest here in customer relationships. But a lot of times we forget about the employees that are helping us build all this. So I think for an entrepreneur, when you're answering the survey, yes, your first priority is your business and growing your business, and you're looking at the challenges. But sometimes you take for granted the employees that are needed for that growth or your business plan in the coming, in the next 5 years. So I think, to Shawn's point there, that you can buy a software, but you need people to operate that software. The software is not going to run your business on its own.
Yeah, that's a great point on the trailing indicator there too, right? Because I think when we touched upon how things have changed in the last year from that transition to the kind of holdback during COVID to the go, that's a lagging indicator of opportunity and change there. And I can definitely think that when we conducted the survey across late summer, this is an indication of maybe founders saying, hey, talent and recruiting has been top of mind for me. Really focused on it. We're buying the collaboration software. Those two things will solve for themselves. And now, right now, they're in the midst of, we really need to figure out how to bring together a remote hybrid culture, and all these things that might have not been a problem for one or two employees, as Shawn was saying, scale across, entire divisions. So probably this is the best time to get less involved in here, just because, you're representing the pros who know how to do this, right? Like, you help businesses integrate this technology,
No pressure.
and how to do it. And yeah, no pressure. I'm not saying, but one of the things that you had kind of mentioned when we were preparing for this is like, what does it mean to deploy tech for a virtual experience? And maybe start there, and then we can just get a little weird with it in the back end, talk about the differences between asynchronous virtual culture, go through all that. But just in terms of like, so just some standard best practices when you're talking to small businesses about like, okay, as we said, pushing the button isn't enough. There's more that needs to come following. What's some of the guidance that you're providing customers at Cisco?
Sure. Just to follow up on that last point, I would also maybe suggest that that's kind of a natural leadership attribute when you're trying to figure out, how do you work with your people? How do I find people that are smarter than I am in certain areas to run my business effectively? And, often as an entrepreneur, you probably are, like Andrew said, so focused on the idea and the market share, but you're also the leader. Right. So it's a leadership attribute that you probably want to also consider, that you find those people that can help you drive those strategies and those goals that you're trying to achieve for your business. From a technology standpoint, I'm just going to tell you how we kind of look at our business when it comes to approaching a small business. Right. Again, leading with heart, to be fair. So we kind of break it down. So the first thing that we want to look at is necessity. Do they need it for their business? We're asking ourselves this too before we approach the business. We assume the business is going to be asking themselves. So we want to have that answer in advance of coming at you with a solution or a suggestion, right? Second is price, right? They don't want to be oversold on something that they don't need or can't afford. So is it affordable, and how does it compare to other products that they could be looking at? Is it simple? What is the simplicity? I think that ties back to your question a little bit more, Doug, on, how are they going to install it? How are they going to manage it? We are prepared to go, and to have those conversations of saying, here's what we have to offer from a Cisco design perspective. But we're also going to take it that step further. Here's how you will install it. Here's how you will manage it. Here's who you will call if you have a question or something's not working for somebody, right? So we're going to have that as as an offer when we go to you. Then we're going to go to scalability. Will the product scale when their business grows? Because we know from this wonderful survey that the number one thing is the market share aspect, right? Let's answer that in advance before we ask you to invest. And then finally, feature richness, right? So does the product have functionalities that you might need in the future? Again, focusing on your people plan, focusing on your growth plans. So that's really the formula to our success. That's what we're asking ourselves day in and day out when we curated the Cisco design portfolio, and Cisco, is investing in the small business segment. And that's what we assume small businesses are asking themselves as well. So we have that conversation, and then we can agree on what makes the most sense, because it's not a one size fits all scenario for any company, especially today.
Yeah, that's really awesome to hear. Like, just the ideas of, again, forethought, understanding what comes next before you need it, and then the idea that that's true leadership to put that planning in place, I think is something that every entrepreneur can resonate with, or at least should be paying attention to if it doesn't resonate with them. And goes back to what Shawn had said before. So I maybe want to throw to him and just get, again, some personal experience here, because this isn't something that we're commentating from up on high. You've been living this, right? Not only having your company be acquired, become part of a larger organization, now becoming one team within a large body of teams. Can you just describe to us what that experience has been like? Probably, I would say, informing some of the feedback you've been giving about different time zones, different work environments, in office, out of office, completely asynchronous. Like, what's really sticking with you when you think about that in your team from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, first and foremost, a lot of it goes back to our employees, and having, shared goals, shared missions that we can rally around. At Ideal, we certainly always like to have a mission and a vision that we're working towards. And if that has to change or alter, being very transparent and being very clear about it. We would talk to our team, once a week in a very transparent and candid way. We would have these company stand-ups throughout the pandemic, and we always had them, but throughout the pandemic, they became even more important. Just weekly short bursts of information. What I have found, especially, in lockdown, where there wasn't a lot of certainty, it was always best to just tell your team that certain things are uncertain. People often, really prefer hearing the truth about what you're doing, what you're thinking, and your decision-making process, even if the outcome isn't amazing. Like in lockdown, and then to add to that, once we started going through the growth, once the kind of initial fear of the pandemic started to die down, and we started experiencing some growth, and then of course the hecticness of the acquisition, again it came down to communication. People, your team just wants to hear from you, even when you screw up, even when you change your mind or explain why you made a certain decision. And so we know things are uncertain. They become even more uncertain with COVID. And that's where communication, is one of the most important things you can do. And for us, we didn't change that posture throughout the acquisition. So we continued to tell our team, what was going on. Of course, when you're going through an acquisition, there's some things that you can't share. But when your team is used to having you share, 99% of your thinking with them, then they understand that sometimes there's a tiny little bit that you can't share with them at all times. But when you don't have that cadence of always sharing information and being transparent, then you get less buy-in from your team when you do have to do something that surprises them, like, surprise, we just got acquired by Ceridian, right? As in one example would be a big surprise for the team. And so, I think that by being transparent as much as you possibly can when there are surprises or things go great or things don't go great, you have a bit of buy-in from your team. And so that's what we really focused on, is communication, transparency, and sharing information as frequently as possible.
Okay. That makes sense. What I'm hearing from that, though, is one of the intended outcomes from that transparency is not only probably is it the right thing to do for the people that work for you, but it helps maintain that team cohesion. Was it harder to kind of maintain that cohesion when things moved remote, and maybe in some of the elements where you couldn't be fully transparent, at least they'd be seeing you in the office, working away or trying to solve the problem? Did it become harder to not necessarily convince, but demonstrate the thought your leadership team was putting in remotely? Was there any proactive steps you were taking to kind of manage against that? Again, the lack of tangible connection?
It was absolutely harder, no doubt about it. And we did tons of experimentation during lockdown to try and keep that cohesion, which I'm sure a lot of other organizations did, right? Like everything from team building events virtually. So one thing that we always like to do at Ideal was have a really great holiday party. It was kind of became a bit of a tradition going back to the first business that I co-founded. And it's just, we always found that employees love to, once a year really have a good time together. And so during the pandemic, we really thought, oh, like, what are we going to do? We have a bit of a reputation of really investing in the team, in the holidays and making it something that we can have bonding experiences over. And so what we did, it's just as one example of how we were proactive. I think we tried our best to be proactive. Was, we arranged for everyone to get a boxed meal from a really great restaurant. We did have a Zoom holiday party where we actually ate together, and we encouraged people to kind of set up a table with your spouse or your partner, or whomever you wanted to bring. And we ate together. Then we went into breakout rooms where we played some online games together. And you know what? It could have failed miserably. Everyone might have thought, this holiday parties don't work virtually. And trust me, the real life one was better. But I think everyone really liked it. Everyone had a good time. And we were able to still create some of those bonds that we would create in person. So yeah, we were very proactive about it. I mean, we would do team lunches where we would send everybody, Uber Eats gift cards as another example. And in the grand scheme of things, that's not a big cost, right? Now, sure, if you do it every day, fine, it can be. But just to be able on a Friday where we would often get lunch in person to just all of a sudden, everyone gets a $20 Uber Eats gift card in their inbox and says, hey, I'm opening a Zoom channel where I'm having lunch if anyone wants to jump in. And people would jump in and we could still eat together. So it was tough. It was very tough. And now that we're returning to the office, I'm one of those people that I do, not every day, but I do like being in the office. And so seeing people in real life is better, but there are ways to continue to build those relationships virtually for sure. But you have to be proactive about it. You have to put effort into it. It won't really happen just organically. It's organic and purposeful.
Yeah, I just want every entrepreneur watching this right now to really, really pay attention to what I'm about to say. If you have an opportunity to feed your team in whatever form, do it, because the benefits will by far outweigh the costs in whatever form. That's something that we've experienced personally at BetaKit. It's interesting because you're just talking so much about leadership through this transition, through this great transformation. Andrew, I want to go back to you as we kind of look to close this out, simply because one of the questions you asked, honestly, right at the very end of our prep call, which kind of threw me for a loop. I'm like, well, we better save that for the stream. Is this transformation isn't going away. The weight of some of the changes might wax and wane, but this is just part of the new reality now. And one of the questions you asked is like, how do we view this worker of the future? What is best for them, and what are best for the teams comprising them? And I'm just wondering if you've found any answers to that in the work that you do at PwC or the companies that you're talking to across Canada, or if talent is the hot button question of today, if that worker of the future is tomorrow's question.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a hot topic, and I think in a certain fashion, it's a bit of a polarizing topic because there's so many different viewpoints out there, and people think it should be fully in person working. Some people say it should be fully at home. Others are hybrid, and there's so many different views out there. I think in the market, I think ultimately there's no one size fits all. I think when you're looking at talent, everybody's different. Everybody's an individual. Everybody has different needs. People are in different stages of their lives. Some people may be, younger, single. Some people may be taking care of somebody more elderly. Some people have kids. Like everybody has a different personal situation. And I think, how you manage that talent has to be tailored, to each person. And I think we actually recently at PwC, we issued a global culture survey. So, going to Shawns' point, I think culture is very important because one of the results of our survey was that, some employees are losing trust in their companies, that they're not flexible enough to meet the new demands of this new world. And that's why we're seeing the fallout now of what you mentioned before, the great resignation and, people leaving organizations that have maybe cultures that are more aligned to their own. But I think, really having a tailored solution to each employee, or giving the employee flexibility to kind of say how they want to work and how they'll perform best, for a company, and always not forgetting about the culture of the company. Like Sean said, they did virtual, events to keep that culture going, but there's nothing like being in person. But you have to be flexible in that too. And how do you promote the company culture if it's virtually or if it's in person, and really take into account both solitudes, right? Because there's going to be some people that, working from home has changed their lives, and, they want to go forward with working from home 100%. And they're probably a very good employee that should be kept, at the company that you want to keep and encourage. So I think there's no one size fits all. To be flexible to each employee. And at PwC, that's the approach, we've taken, like a hybrid model that, we're not telling employees you have to come into the office a certain number of days per week. It's really activity based. So if there's a certain task where it makes sense that you're in the office or at a client site, then you do that. If it makes sense to work at home, you work at home. And then take into account also everybody's personal situation. So it could be, well, maybe for the next 12 months, working 100% at home is best for you. And I think we have to nurture all the talent we have and keep our key employees.
Yeah, especially in circumstances, as you're saying, not only are employees really, maybe they like their new circumstances, but there's also, as we said, with the hiring explosion, there's a lot of new employees that haven't experienced that in-person holiday party, or maybe, you know, they were the first remote employee in a new country or time zone and they definitely can't make it. So being able to plan for that is so important. You know, we were using the word culture. I was using the word cohesion. I don't really know why. Andrew, you kind of anchored that around the idea of trust, which I think is paramount. And then again, spoilers, feed your teams. It really, really helps. It's a big deal. We are kind of at time. We kind of went like pretty hard into this, so we're gonna have to wrap it up. So if you had a question that I obviously didn't get answered on this, don't worry, because you can leave a comment on Facebook, on Twitter, post it on BetaKit even, and we'll make sure that for the wrap up article post on BetaKit with a VOD that we ask it of the panelists and make sure it gets included. So if you're seeing this right now and freaking out because I didn't ask your question, don't worry, there's still time. But I want to give just the last few minutes here to Alyssa, because we wouldn't necessarily normally do this, but I think this really resonates with kind of what's going on right now, because disclosure, I'm not only your panel moderator today, I'm also a judge for the Fast Future Innovation Awards that are being put on by Cisco, which is a pretty big deal, because I think this emphasizes some of the commitment that you were talking about before, where this isn't just like, you know, the standard award show. We're talking about like $300,000 worth of investment, in-kind services and support from Cisco for Canadian businesses looking to solve big problems. So I just want to close off on that and maybe get you to say a few words so that people watching this, you know, they have a very strong call to action to maybe pay attention to some of the things that we talked about on today's conversation.
Yeah, Doug, I can't thank you enough for giving me this opportunity. It is genuinely just so impressive that we were able to do this. It is for Canadian businesses only. There's 3 separate prizes. It's not just one. And it is an opportunity to actually change the, you know, a business's dynamic almost immediately with the amount of funding that you can win from these innovation awards. So just so proud of Cisco for putting this out there. Can't wait to read the stories and meet the all of the individuals that come out for this. And thank you to you for being a judge. So you just want to go, well, you can always reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn, and I can get you sorted. You can go to the Cisco Small Business page. And then there's also there's a link, Cisco Fast Future Innovation Awards.com. So check it out and do take advantage of it and let us help.
Yeah, and I'll say, you know, if you want to read an awesome interview that we did with Wayne Cuervo of Cisco about all the component, like how to make sure that your application really resonates, check that out on BetaKit. I'll say, you know, I will be a judge. I'm tough, but I'm also fair. And I'm also very grateful to be your kind of host and moderator for today's conversation. A lot of interesting numbers. We really appreciate you. This is the first time we've ever really done a public survey before. We're really grateful for Cisco and the Cisco design team to step up to allow us to do it. But we're really thankful that you also took the time to fill out the answers so that we could learn a bit and then bring these experts on to have that conversation. So thank you once again. We'll see you in the next one. BetaKit out.